The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Chapter 1. Variation under Domestication. Yeah, give me a moment. When we look to the individuals of the same variety or subvariety of our older cultivated plants and animals, one of the first points which strikes us is they generally differ much more from each other than do the individuals of any one species or variety of the same state of nature. When we reflect on the vast diversity of plants and animals which have been cultivated, and which have varied during all ages under most different climate and treatments, I think we are driven to conclude that the greater variability is simply due to our domestic productions having been raised under conditions of life, not so uniform as somewhat different from those who which the present species have been exposed under nature. There is also, I think, some probability in the view propounded. There's some probability in the view propounded by Andrew Knight that this variability may be partly connected with an excess of food. It seems pretty clear that organic beings must be exposed during several generations to the new conditions of life to cause any appreciable amount of variation, and that when the organization has once begun to vary, it generally continues to vary for many generations. No case is on record of variable beings ceasing to be variable under cultivation. Our oldest cultivated plants, such as wheat, still yield new varieties. Our oldest domesticated animals are still capable of rapid improvement or modification. Jesus Christ. It's been disputed at what period of time the causes of variability, whether they may be, generally act, whether during the early or late periods of development of the embryo, or at the instant of conception. Geoffroy St. Hilier's experiments show that the unnatural treatment of the embryos causes monstrosities. Yeah, that's monstrosities. And monstrosities cannot be separated by any clear line of distinction from mere variation. But I'm strongly inclined to suspect the most frequent cause of variability may be attributed to the male and female reproductive elements having been affected prior to the act of conception. Several reasons to make me believe this. But the chief one is the remarkable effect which confinement or cultivation has on the functions of the reproductive system. This system appearing to be far more susceptible than any other part of the organism to the action of any changes of the condition of life. Nothing is more easy than to tame an animal, and few things more difficult than to get it to breed freely under confinement. Even in many cases when the male and female unite, how many animals are there which will not breed, though living long under not very close confinement of their native country? This is generally attributed to the vitality instincts. Attributed to the vitilated instincts. But how many cultivated plants display the utmost vigor and yet rarely never seed? This is all about animals and plants fucking? Jesus Christ. All right, fucking, all right. In some few such cases, it has been found that very trifling changes, such as little or more or less water at some particular point of growth, will determine whether or not a plant sets a seed. I cannot here enter on the copious details which I have collected. Oh, I bet you have some copious details, you dirty fuck. I cannot here enter on the copious details which I have collected on the curious subject, but to show how singular the laws are which determine the reproduction of an animal under confinement. I may just mention that carnivorous animals, even from the tropics, breed in this country pretty freely under confinement, with the exception of plantigrades, or bear family, whereas carnivorous birds, with the rarest exceptions, hardly ever lay fertile eggs. Many exotic plants have been pollen utterly worthless. What does that even mean? Many exotic plants have been pollen under worthless. This is a terrible, terrible transcript. In the exact same condition as for most sterile hybrids. When one, on the other hand, we see the domesticated animals and plants often go through weak and sickly yet breeding quite freely under confinement, and when, on the other hand, we see individuals, through taken young from state of nature, perfectly tamed, long-lived and healthy, of which I could give numerous instances, yet having their reproductive system so seriously affected and by unperceived causes as to fail in acting. We need not be surprised at this system when it does not act under confinement, acting not quite regularly and producing offspring, not perfectly like their parents or viable. Oy. Sterility has been said to be the bane of horticulture, but on this view we owe veritability to the same cause which produces sterility, and veritability is one of the sources of all of the choices of production of the garden. I may add that as some organisms will breed most freely under the most unnatural conditions, for instance, the rabbit and ferret kept in hutches, showing their reproductive system has not been thus affected, so will some animals and plants withstand domestication or cultivation, and very, very slightly perhaps, hardly more than in a state of nature. Oh my god. Okay. A long list could easily be given of sporting plants. S-P-O-R, sporting plants. By this term, gardeners mean a single bud or offset which suddenly assumes a new and sometimes very different character from that of the rest of the plant. Such buds can be propagated by grafting. And, okay, that's just an ampersand, a C, a comma, and a period in a line. And sometimes by seed, these sports, I think it's supposed to say spores. No, oh no, it is sports. These sports are extremely rare under nature. Okay, I think they mean sport in the sense that a plant growing up. You know, never mind, fuck it. Where am I? Shit. Given these 20 plants by term, I'm just going to start here. When suddenly assumes a new and sometimes very different character from the rest of the plant, such buds can be propagated by grafting. Oh, there I am. These sports are extremely rare under nature, but far from rare under cultivation. And in this case, we see the treatment of the parent has affected a bud or offset, and not the ovules or pollen. But it's the opinion of most psychologists, most physiologists, most physiologists, that there is no essential difference between a bud and an ovule in the earliest stages of formation, so that, in fact, sports, supporting my view, that veritability may be largely attributed to the ovules or pollen, or both, having been affected by the treatment of parents prior to the act of conception. These cases anyhow show that variation is not necessarily connected, as some authorities have supported, with the act of generation. Whew. Seedlings from the same fruit and the young of the same litter sometimes differ considerably from each other, though both the young and the parents, as Mueller has remarked, have apparently been exposed to exactly the same conditions of life. And this shows how unimportant the direct effects of conditions of life are in comparison to the laws of reproduction, and of growth, and of inheritance. Had the action of the condition been directly, if any by the young had varied, all would have probably varied to the same manner. To judge how much, in the case of any variation, we should attribute to the direct action of heat, moisture, light, food, etc. Okay, again, there's that ampersand C. I think it's supposed to be etc., but it's really bad. It's most difficult. My impression is that with animals such as agencies, agencies. Such agencies have produced very little direct effect, though apparently more than the case of plants. Under this point of view, Mr. Buckman's recent experiments on plants seem extremely valuable. When all or nearly all the individuals are exposed to a certain condition, they are affected in the same way. The change at first appears to be directly due to such conditions, but in some cases it can be shown that quite opposite conditions produce similar changes of structure. Nevertheless, the same amount of change, I think, can be attributed to the direct action of the conditions of life, as in some cases increased size from amount of food, color, or particular kinds of food and light, and perhaps the thickness of fur from the climate. Are we still talking about plants here? Habitat also has a deciding influence as the period of flowering with the plants when transported from one climate to another in animals. It has been more marked effect. For instance, I find in the domesticated duck that the bones of the wings weigh less and the bones of the legs more in proportion to the whole of the skeleton than I do in the same bones from the wild duck. And I presume that change is mainly safely attributed to the domestication of duck flying much less and walking much more than its wild parent ancestor. The great and inherited development of the udders in cows and goats in countries where they have been habitually milked, in comparison with the state of these organs in other countries, is another instance of the affected use. Not a single domestic animal can be named which is not in some country drooping ears, and this view suggested by other authors that the drooping is due to the disuse of muscles in the ear, from the animal not being alarmed as much in danger. There are many laws regarding variation, for some few of which can be dimly seen and will be hereafter briefly mentioned. I will here only allude to what may be called a correlation of growth. Any change in the embryo or larva will almost certainly entail change in the mature animal. In monstrosities, the correlation between quite distant parts are very curious, and many instances are given in Isidore Geoffrey St. Hilaire's great work on the subject. Breeders believe that long limbs are almost always accompanied by an elongated head. Some instances of correlation are quite whimsical. Thus, cats with blue eyes are invariably deaf. Color and constitutional peculiarities go together. Color and constitutional peculiarities? Like peculiar? Why do you gotta make up words, man? Constitutional peculiarities go together, of which many remarkable cases could be given amongst animals and plants. From the facts collected by Husinger, it appears that white sheep and pigs are differently affected from colored individuals by certain vegetable poisons. Hairless dogs have imperfect teeth. Long-haired and coarse-haired animals are apt to have. Long-haired and short-haired animals are apt to have, What? As is asserted, long or many horns, pigeons with feathers, feet have skin between their outer toes. Pigeons with short beaks have small feet, and those with long beaks large feet. Hence, if man goes on selecting and thus augmenting any peculiarity, he will almost certainly unconsciously modify other parts of structure owing to the mysterious laws of correction of growth. Give me a minute here. I'll be right back. Yeah, just 1 minute. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Where am I? The result of the various quite unknown or dimly seen laws of variation is infinitely complex and diversified. It is well worth carefully to study the several treatises published on some of our old cultivated plants, as on the hyacinth potato, even the Delilah. Oh, geez. And it's really surprising to note the endless points in structure and constitution in which the varieties and subvarieties slightly differ from each other. The whole organization seems to have become plastic and tends to depart in some small degree from that of the parental type. Any variety which is not inherited is unimportant for us, but the number and diversity of inheritable divisions of structure, both those of sight and those of considerable physiological importance, is endless. Dr. Propsker Lucia's treatise in 2 larger volumes is the fullest and best on the subject. No breeder doubts how strong is the tendency to inheritance. Like produces like of his fundamental belief. Gee, my God. Doubts have been thrown on the principle by theoretical writers alone. When a division appears not unfrequently, and we see it with the father and child, we cannot tell whether it may or may not be due to the same original cause acting on both. But when amongst individuals apparently exposed to the same condition, any rare variation due to some extraordinary combination of circumstances appears in the parents, say, once amongst several million individuals, and it reappears in the child. The mere doctrine of chance almost compels us to attribute its reappearance to inheritance. Everyone must have heard of cases in albinism, prickly skin, hairy bodies, etc., appearing in several members of the family. If strange and rare deviations of structure are truly inherited, less strange and commoner deviations may be freely admitted to be inheritable. Perhaps the correct way of viewing the whole subject would be to look at the inheritance of every character wherever as the rule, and not the inheritance as the anomaly. Okay. This is I'm sure this is a really, really good book, but I can't read out loud, man. Damn. All right. Let's keep. Wow. 17 minutes. It's going to be a long fucking day. The laws governing inheritance are quite unknown. No one can say why the same peculiarness in affected individuals of the same species and individuals of different species is sometimes inherited and sometimes not so. Why the child often reverts to certain characteristics of its grandfather or grandmother or as much more remote ancestor. Why is peculiarness often transmitted from one sex to both sexes? I can't say peculiarness. It's peculiarity. Oh, it's peculiarity. Oh man, they misspelt most of them. Why a peculiarity is often transmitted from one sex to both sexes or one sex alone, more commonly but not exclusively to the like sex. It is a fact of some little importance to us that peculiarities appearing to the males of our domestic breeds are often transmitted either exclusively or in much greater degree to males alone. A much more important rule, which I think may be trusted, is that whatever period of life a peculiarity first appears, it tends to appear in the offspring at a corresponding age, though sometimes earlier. In many cases, this could not be otherwise. Thus, the inherited peculiarity in the horns of cattle could appear only to the offspring when newly mature. Peculiarities in the silkworm are known to appear at the corresponding caterpillar or cocoon stage, but hereditary disease and some other facts make me believe that the rule has been wider, has been a wider extension, and that where there is no apparent reason why a peculiarity should appear at any particular age, yet that does tend to appear in the offspring at the same period at which it first appeared in the parent. I believe this rule is of the same highest importance in explaining the laws of embryology. These remarks are of course confined to the first appearance of the peculiarity and not to its primary cause, which may have acted on the ovules of the male element in nearly the same manner as the crossed offspring from a short-horned cow by a longhorned bull. The greater length of the horns, though appearing late in life, is clearly due to the male element. Jesus. Oh, I'm almost out. Hold on. Oh, shit. Hold on. Oh, yeah. That's the good stuff. Come on. All right. Thumbs up. Yep. No, that's good. No, that's good. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Where am I? The result of the variations, quite unknown or dimly seen laws of variation, is infinitely complex and diversified. It is well worthwhile carefully to study the several treatises published on some of the old cultivated plants, as on the high. See, I don't know what that word is. Hyacinth. Oh, ouch. Oh, it burns. Oh, it burns. Okay. As on the hyacinth potato, even the... Oh, wait a minute. I think I've read that part already. Fuck, I did read that part already. Hold on. Due to the male element. There we go. Okay. Having alluded to the subject of revertism, the subject of reversion. Why? Okay. Having alluded to the subject of reversion, this is a terrible, terrible transcript. Oh my god. I may here refer to a statement often made by naturalists, namely that our domestic variations, when run wild, gradually but certainly revert in character to their aboriginal stocks. Hence it has been argued that no I'm just skipping that word altogether, can be drawn from domestic races to species in a state of nature. I have in vain endeavored to discover on what disease facts the above statement has so often and so boldly been made. There would be great difficulty in proving its truth. We mainly safely conclude that many variety of the most strongly marked domestic varieties could not possibly live in a wild state. In many cases, we do not know what the aboriginal stock was, and so could not tell whether or not nearly perfect reversion had ensued. It would be quite necessary in order to prevent the effects of intercrossing, but only a single variety should be turned loose on its new home. Nevertheless, as our varieties certainly do occasionally revert in some of their characteristics to ancestral forms, it seems to me not improbable that if we could succeed in naturalizing or were to cultivate during many generations the several races, for instance, of the cabbage in very poor soil, that they would a large extent or even wholly revert to the wild or aboriginal stock. Whether or not the experiment would succeed is not of great importance for our line of argument. For by the experiment itself, the conditions of life are changed. If it could be shown that our domestic variations manifested a strong tendency to revision, is that to lose the acquired domestic characteristics and varieties in regular species, but there is not a shadow of evidence in my favor to this view. To assert that we could not breed our cart and race horses, long and short-horned cattle and poultry of various breeds, and esculent vegetables for an almost infinite number of generations, would be opposed to all experience. I may add that when under nature the conditions of life do change, variations and reversions of character probably do occur, but natural selection, as will hereafter will be explained, will determine how far the new characteristics through arising shall be perceived. Okay. All right. By glancing at it curiously as at the end old animal at a circus, and you will find carrying not with about its condition. Naturally a town should grow. You can look upon it as a child, which through natural conditions should attain manhood, and through its surrounding thriving districts, its products of farm, shop, or factory, it should show a spirit of occasional with surrounding towns, crawl out of it lateralously, and find back how backwards it is. Now in all such towns you will find occasional an individual born with that sort of brain which is knowing to its own town is backwards, longing to start things towards improving it, not only its living conditions, but adding institution or two, such as any city, big or small, maintains grates for its inhabitants, but so forward-looking as a man finds that trying to instill such notions into a town's ruling body is about as satisfactory as butting against a brick wall. Such boards, as you find ruling any small town, functioning from such a sulphuric rut, that any hint, digging cash from the cached, iron strongbox will be a big brass padlock, will fall upon minds as rigid as rock. Brandon Hills had such men to whom such rigorously was annoyed by the thorn in his foot, continuously trailing, brought only by a continual pain. Pricks utterly, finally, a brilliant plan that took forth hereas. You see, that was from the book Gatsby, a book written entirely without the letter E, and it sounded a shit ton like The Origin of Species. What was I saying? Hold on. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's a great book. Like, I have no doubt that... Look, I know The Origin of Species is a fantastic book. I can't fucking deal with this shit, alright? Ow. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, okay. Alright. Here we go. In the case of most of our ancestrally domesticated animals and plants, I do not think it is possible to come to any definite conclusion whether they have descended from one or several species. The argument mainly relied on by those who believe in the multiple origins of our domesticated animals is that we find the most ancient records, more specifically on the momentous of Egypt, monumentus of Egypt. Oh, this English. Okay. More especially on the monumentus of Egypt. Much diversity in the breeds, and that of some of the breeds closely resemble perhaps are identical with those who are still existing. Even if this latter fact were found more strictly and generally true, then it seems to be particularly the case. Oh, okay. That was... Oh, okay. I swear to God, if I puke, this is going to be really embarrassing. Ancient Egypt. Where am I? Okay, Oh, Egypt. There we go. Even if this latter fact were found more strictly and generally true than seems to me in the cases, what does it show but that of some of our breeds originated here 4,000 or 5,000 years ago? But Mr. Horner's research has it rendered in some degree promptable that man's sufficiently civilized to have manufactured pottery existed in the valley of Nile 13 or 14,000 years ago, and who will pretend to say how long these things of ancient periods, savages like those of Terra Fungus or Australia, who possess semi-domestic dogs, may have not existed in Egypt? ? How was that? Was that whole thing a question or something? Oh my God. The whole subject must, I think, remain vague. Nevertheless, I may, without... I'm busy! The whole subject I think, remain vague. Nevertheless, I may, without here entering any detail, state that from geographical and other considerations, I think it's highly probable that our domestic dogs have descended from several wild species. In regards to sheep and goats, I can form no opinion. I should think from facts communicated to me by... Oh, wait. No, that's fine. Okay. Communicated to me by Mr. Blythe on the habitat, voices, and constitutions of the humbled Indian cattle, that these descended from several different Aboriginal stock from our European cattle, and several contemplated judges believe that these latter have been more than the wild ones. With respect to horses, from research I cannot give here, I am undoubtedly uncertain to believe that the opposition have proceeded from the common wild Indian foal in regards to ducks and rabbits. The breeds which consider differently from the structure, I do not doubt that they have come into the wild duck and rabbit. 57, 58, 59, 30 minutes. Fuck you. I'm out. Peace. Buy the whole DVD set if you want the rest of this. Fuck you. Bye-bye.